Okay, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Travis's Musings. This is the part 2 continuation of the admin interviews, and today we are lucky enough to have Matt Edlin with us, who is not necessarily a admin or a moderator on the seasonal Facebook page, but he's a rather important individual within our community. He is, of course, the creator, owner, and operator of TSPCalc.com. And Matt, we really appreciate you sitting down with us tonight.
Thanks, Travis.
Why don't you go ahead and start off and kind of introduce yourself, give us your own TSP story, because it seems that everybody's got one, and maybe kind of touch on the origins of TSPCalc, because I think that probably ties into your story a little bit.
Okay. I started in the government in 2013, and I worked in a shipyard in the Pacific Northwest. I fixed cranes. But I've been contributing to my TSP since 2013. And when I was living in Okinawa, I was still contributing to the TSP, and I wanted to learn more about it. So I joined a forum called TSP Center. And there I learned about seasonal investing from somebody else who was doing it long before I did. And I liked the concept so much that I built the website around it. And it was never really intended to be a business. It was a hobby that exploded in popularity, and
right.
Here we are.
Well, and I think a lot of it is that people want more control over their retirement, right? I mean, people don't like to just, I guess set it and forget it. They want to think that they've got some semblance of control, even though there's a lot that they can't control. And I think that that's what makes seasonality popular, not to mention the success that a lot of people have had with it.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, especially in our Facebook group now, the people who are joining honestly don't know much at all, and they're asking very beginner questions, and I don't have a problem with that, really. I do invite people to read up, because we've already put out a lot of great information in the group for beginners, and my blog, once I start writing more in that, will have a lot of articles that cater to beginners as well.
Yeah, it's a lot of information. I mean, you go through the units, which we've talked about in multiple media centers here about how the units and the importance of understanding what you're doing. I still get emails on the customer service side, of course, saying, "Hey, Travis, I didn't get it. Why aren't you telling me where to put my TSP every month?" And people don't understand this is kind of a self-learning, evolving educational experience for their own retirement fund, right? I mean, that's kind of the goal.
Yeah, I mean, it started focused on seasonals, and it's still pretty heavily focused on seasonals. And we as a group are helping with these new beginners, because a lot of people, there aren't people helping.
Right.
The TSP website honestly offers quite a bit of information. If you just start there and start reading, you're going to learn a lot.
Right. And I talked a little bit with Jaron on our interview last month, and it feels like the tide is turning a little bit with a lot of people in regards to the G fund. Of course, HR used to tell everybody just to put all their money in the G fund because it was safe or whatever. And so it's good to, I don't know, I really am encouraged by the amount of people who are wanting to educate themselves on their own future, because it's been my personal goal, of course, has always been to get people out of the G fund. I don't care if you're buy and hold. I don't care if you stick it in the L funds. Anything's better than spending 25 years in the G fund. But
yeah, and that's a great point. I don't have anything against buy and hold. My website is really intended for people who want to explore further possibilities. If you're a beginner, buying and holding in the C and the S funds and a little bit in I is not a bad way to go.
Right.
Honestly.
And, it should be noted, people sometimes get confused on the Facebook group when we don't allow for buy and hold discussion, mostly because, in my opinion, there are other TSP groups that focus directly on buy and hold, and it kind of detracts, obviously, from seasonality and the seasonal discussion. But at the end of the day, it's not buy and hold's not a rocket science revolution. I mean, it's pretty simple. You put your money in, you leave it alone, right?
Yeah, and history suggests that it works. Like if you go all the way back to the early 1900s, and there's charts that do this that show the Dow We've been through World War II. We've been through all sorts. We've been through several pandemics. We went through the Spanish flu, and World War I and World War II, and the stock market in the U.S. has always come back because our economy is rather resilient.
Right.
And that's the idea behind buy and hold. It's not a flawed premise. It works quite well. And if you want to set something to just leave it alone, you can do that. Just, don't set it in the G fund. If you're looking at 5+ years, there's no reason to be in the G fund unless you're following some kind of strategy.
Right.
Whether it be seasonal or technical in nature.
Right. No, that's good advice. And that kind of, and it's taken me a couple years to come around to your way of thinking. And I'm surprised that you didn't rub it in my face a little bit more, which, by the way, your beer is going out tomorrow in the mail. But, so for those of you who have been paying attention, I jumped on the all equities bandwagon this year with my strategy, both on my beer bet strategy and, of course, in my real TSP. I'm now 100% in the S fund. And for all practical purposes, it's a hybrid buy and hold, right? I mean, we're always in equities, and we're trying to identify the seasonal trends of the strongest time of year for the certain funds that were available. Which, of course, TSP only allows us 3. It's pretty limited in scope, but.
Yeah, so the all equity strategies that you're talking about are seasonal strategies that are either in the C or the S fund. And then you could also choose to throw in some I fund as well. The C and the S and the I being equities funds.
Right.
So these are seasonal strategies that don't spend any time at all in G or F.
Right. And is that your strategy again this year? Are you in an all equities, or did you switch out?
My beer bet strategy is in CS and I. Granted, it was based on the seasonal builder and blind test from the end of last year. And since then, I've found some problems in the builder that I'm currently fixing.
Right.
So the new blind test data will probably be out this weekend. But I'll probably own up to the strategy. I mean, I'm the one who's responsible for the builder, so I need to own up for its flaws, and I'll probably stick with my beer bet strategy just to be honest.
Yeah, you can't be switching now. I mean, I know you've got the programming keys to give yourself the new best one, right? So let's kind of backtrack a little bit. Kind of going back to you, what is your current retirement scenario? How many years do you have before you realistically see yourself hanging it up? And maybe talk a little bit about your current equity strategy. Is it all CS, CSI?
So this might be my last year working for the federal government. That's a real possibility, and that's because running TSPCalc, and I also own TSP Center. I recently bought that. Running those 2 websites is becoming more than a part-time job. Mm-hmm. So this year I've reached an agreement with my employer where I'm taking liberal LWOP, so I can spend more time working on the website. And it might be the case that at the end of this year, I'll put in my notice. I could definitely see that happening.
Yep.
TSPCalc takes so much of my time. And that's one thing I kind of wanted to point out for people. Like, I don't spend all my time looking at the seasonal calculator. I spend all my time on the back end making sure the website is still running.
Right. Right, and that's for the community to jump into, right? That's why you built the calculator, is for the community to have a tool where they can create their own strategies. I mean, that's where that the reliance on the community to continue to find strategies and to continue to tweak is so important.
Oh yeah, and the community is invaluable. Like, community members have found patterns that I never would have noticed. Mm-hmm. Everybody has their own way of looking at things, right. And that's where new ideas come from. The community's been great.
Well, and it's important to, sometimes people get a little bit black and white on seasonality, and I think that there's so much gray, and that people need to understand that that's okay. If you only want to dump 10% of your retirement into seasonality and then go buy and hold with 90, that's all okay. You just need to make sure you do your own math when you're looking at your 90-10. But people, or some people use them as just indicators and things like that, and so there's a lot of applications for your tool depending on your own skill level and, of course, your own risk tolerance, which I think is pretty cool. So
yeah, and there's a lot of people in our group who use seasonality and technical indicators, so that they inform their stock trades based on multiple different things.
To great success, especially last year. We had a multiple. I mean, one of my coworkers, I didn't know this. He actually just sent me a message yesterday. His PIP in January was 45%, I think is what it was. So he had a pretty good year last year. So yeah. I think he went all in at the end of April into S Fund after missing the big dip on the front end and rode that up all the way to December. So I would have liked to have been in that train, but unfortunately, I made poor decisions.
I definitely didn't make 45% in my account either. So good for him, and good for all of our users who, some people have been posting pips like 60%.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, it's really cool to see. I mean, I don't know. I find that stuff really neat. I mean, when you make money, it's not like I lose money, and so I'm always rooting for people to do well. So. So let's talk about, you mentioned that you are also the owner of TSP Center. So what is the future of TSP Center and TSPCalc, and what are your plans and your goals for 2021 for the website, your business, and so forth?
Okay, so I bought TSP Center last summer because the guy who was running it at the time just wanted to be done. And so he was ready to walk away, and I offered him, not very much money, and I bought the site from him. And the reason it was so cheap is because it's very old code. Like this website was built before mobile phones were prevalent, so it doesn't look good on mobile phones, and there's bugs in it, and there's a lot of copy and paste in the code. So I'm fixing all of that. It runs on an old version of PHP. It runs on an old version of the forum software, which is called PHP BB. That's all way out of date, and I'm in the process of fixing that. Probably either this weekend or next weekend.
Awesome.
TSP Center will be massively upgraded. Now, some of the features that are there right now aren't going to be available right away. I'm going to have to rebuild them and add them to the new site. But it's important for me to get the new site up and running, because right now I'm spending so much of my time just keeping the old one alive. And
so is your goal to merge the two sites, or are they going to stay separate, or what are you thinking on that end?
Eventually, yes, because one of the key features of TSP Center is a feature called Fantasy TSP, which I think is awesome. And the implementation there is pretty good, but there's problems with it, and I'm slowly patching those. But in the end, yes, I envision the Fantasy TSP feature and the forum will both be migrated to TSPCalc.
Okay, cool. Any update on the app?
Not really. It's in development. Just please understand the guy who's coding it is a computer science student, so he's learning as he programs, which is great because I'm learning. I've never programmed an app before, and he's learning a lot too. So it's going to take a while, but it is in development.
Awesome. So, and you mentioned something to me the other day, and I think that for the listeners and everybody in the Facebook group, Matt and I are going to start getting together once a month. Is that kind of the plan, right?
Oh, yeah, in person? You going to come over and hot tub with me?
Oh, are we doing that in person? Is that the plan? So, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and expense that as a business trip for a week. And I can get away from my kids for once a month, but I don't know if the wife will appreciate that so much. But we were going to talk about maybe doing a series where we address Facebook group concerns, right? And TSPCalc concerns. Is that kind of what, and customer service concerns and things like that? What's going on the website and whatnot?
Yeah. I think doing a discussion once a month would be awesome.
Cool. So, so speaking of, what are the major issues that seem to be people seem to be having from your end, or bugs that you're trying to fix? And then, of course, we could talk about the zip code adventure on the account creation side.
Okay, so for one thing, the automatically generated receipts that come from Stripe. Stripe is the payment processor. They have a phone number on there, and yes, that's my phone number, but no, I don't answer it because most of those phone calls are scams. So please use the email address. I haven't been able to remove the phone number. It is my intention to do so. It is so much easier for us to handle customer service by email.
Yep.
And Travis normally gets back to people within 24 hours. And when he's not available, I also have access to that email account.
Yep.
Phone number, I can't get it removed because it's an automatically generated email. I'm working on that. It's probably going to be a few months.
Awesome. So then I touched on it too. The biggest thing that I see, of course, from the customer service side is the zip codes. So when you're creating an account or you're going up for renewal, please make sure you go into your credit card section under your My Account and update your zip code and your address. Otherwise, Stripe will, the way it kind of looks like is Stripe actually tries to run it and it puts a pending on there, and so it looks okay, but it actually gets blocked and then refunded to your account, right? That seems to be what Stripe does there.
Yeah, and that's part of the issue is because when I allow new accounts to register, Stripe just verifies, yep, that's a correct credit card.
Right.
And so then I set up the account, and then Stripe tries to run it, and only after they actually try to charge it do they find out the zip code is wrong.
Right.
And that's part of the issue is my website is not set up to follow up on that. So there's no indication to the user that their zip code is wrong other than their transaction doesn't go through.
Right.
But I will say that 90% of the time when somebody contacts us and says, hey, my charge won't go through for whatever reason, 90% of the time it's because the zip code is wrong.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I now that I have access to the Stripe dashboard, it's pretty easy. I can go in there and almost guarantee every time they say, hey, my card won't go through, it's blocked for zip code issues. So if you're starting a new account or you're up for renewal, make sure you verify that your zip code is up to date under your My Account. Otherwise, it will come back as declined and your account will be in limbo. So let's talk a little bit about, we'll kind of wrap up with this, is that you had done an experiment today with the seasonal builder. Did you want to talk about some of your results there?
Yeah, so the seasonal builder, like I said, I found some major problems with it, and it's being repaired as we speak. It'll probably be done with its recalculations this weekend. But the result of that was basically the seasonal builder. For those who don't know this, the premise of the seasonal builder is it's supposed to have pre-calculated every way to trade a month. And then the builder allows you to put 12 months together and form what the website refers to as a strategy. So the problem I found was that roughly 10% of the possible ways to trade a month were missing. So that's being patched right now. But it has finished calculating through 2013. So I ran some testing on 2004 through 2013.
And so Matt, you can't see it from your side, but I've got the strategy pulled up, the 134, 824, and I've got it benchmarked against the CS&I, and I've got it set for 2014 through 2020. And so it's this is the strategy that this was Matt's favorite, right? Your 134, 824?
Well, yeah, so I ran 6 different seasonal builder criteria on the range 2004 through 2013. And what that means is it's only using data from 2004 through 2013 to inform its decisions. And then you can apply something called the best fit, which tries to optimize whatever criteria you gave it. So one of the setups that I ran was C and S fund only, meaning it spends no time in GF or I, and it's trying to optimize the highest rate that it beats the S fund. So it's looking at each month individually and saying, I want to beat the S fund as often as possible, and I want to do it by only using the C and the S funds. So if you run that on 2004 through 2013, it builds strategy number 134824. And then you can roll forward on the seasonal calculator. You can say, show me the statistics 2004 through 2020. And that's where it gets interesting, because then you can compare that to the CS and the I fund, and that's a pretty good litmus test for how this would have performed in the real world.
Right, and so just to clarify for the listeners out there, so the importance of this is that Matt only used data up through 2014. And so all the data we see now from 2014 through 2020, this is all data that was that the builder didn't have. So it would be like, it's basically future testing if you could travel back in time with only the information you had up until that point, right? That's what makes this so important.
Right. If it was December 31st, 2013, okay, you didn't know what the future held, and you were to build a strategy with this tool back then, you would have come out with strategy number 134824. And that strategy, again, is trying to beat the S fund as often as possible on a monthly basis. Right. So it says, okay, so from 2004 through 2013, this was the best you could have done if you're only investing in CNS and you're trying to beat the S fund as often as possible.
Right.
So then the future happens. Remember, you're talking about December 31st, 2013. So now move forward 7 years. And now we're looking at how did that perform 2004 through 2020. It's like a proof of concept.
Right. And you know, this is where I think people, and this is kind of what brought me back, Matt, to the all equities this year, is that people sometimes get strung out on these 30% return years, right? Where the stock, you know, utilizing 50% GNF, and I'm not immune to that either. And it's not to say that those strategies aren't valid, but if your risk tolerance is a little bit lower and you don't want to be as risky with your retirement, these strategies are fantastic because they allow you to, you know, you beat the S fund by 2% on average over those 7 years, and you beat the C fund on average by 1.3% with compounding return of 12 and 27. Those are big numbers long term, right? I mean, people sometimes don't realize how much beating the market by 1 or 2% a year actually affects their retirement long term.
Oh, beating the market by 1% on average is huge. And like I said, this strategy was specifically created to beat the S fund as often as possible. And I think that's important because we're seeing what I believe and what the talking heads are saying. We're seeing a rotation into small stocks. The S fund has been on fire for like 30 or 40 days now. And the expectations are that's going to continue through this year. A lot of experts, people smarter than me, are saying that small and mid-cap stocks are going to outperform the S&P 500 this year.
Right.
And I don't have any reason to doubt that.
Right.
Which makes me think that this strategy that was built specifically to beat the S fund as often as possible is kind of a good choice, because if the S fund's going to do really well this year, and you know, if this is built to beat the S fund, then I think it's going to go well.
Yep. Yeah, that's pretty interesting. And so, you know, this kind of brings me back to kind of what you were talking about at the beginning, is that you're talking about for newer people, buy and hold is a fantastic strategy, or people who don't want to invest the time into education and whatnot. And I think strategies like this, the all equities and things like that, are also for people, right, who want to lower their risk tolerance and still maintain a seasonal edge. I think that these are all pretty interesting, these strategies that are continuing to come out of the builder, personally. But
I think that going all equities is less stressful, if nothing else. I personally invest my own money according to an all equities strategy. So there are some indications of, you know, there might be good times to be out of the market altogether, but what I'm really saying here, especially with this strategy, is we're not looking for a time to be out of the market. We're looking for which of these two funds has historically done better.
Right.
And that's it. And so yeah, you're not going to get 30% returns, but if you can leverage that to get 1% better than market on average, that's a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, people make whole careers out of that, right?
Yeah, I mean, they really do.
They really do.
And, you know, we've got data that this strategy has beat the S fund for 6 out of the 7 last years.
Right.
And that's all blind. Like, when the strategy was built, it had no idea what the last 7 years were going to look like.
Right. It wasn't back testing as much as it is future testing, right? I mean, that's always the criticism on TSPCalc, is that you're cherry picking your back test. where the blind test does the opposite, where it's testing against future data or whatever. So
yeah, the idea of what I call blind testing is that it's not hindsight.
Right.
We have 17 years of data available. Well, if you build a strategy on 17 years of data, you're not going to know how well it's going to perform. You have no indication of how well it's going to perform. But if you take those 17 years and split it, in this case, I split it into 10 years and then 7 years. So the first 10 years was used to build the strategy, and the second 7 years was used to test it. It's kind of like looking into the future.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, no, it's a really good way to utilize the blind test and the strategy builder, and I know that I have been personally trying to get better at using those things because I just haven't used them a whole lot in the past, and I think that the community on the whole would be well served to continue to play with that and kind of come up with really good blind test and seasonal building strategies.
Yeah, and I wanted to say something else, and I know I think the pitchforks are coming for me on this one. I think the annual standard deviation is almost a worthless measurement. That's my personal take, and I think that people focus so much on that. Like they look at strategies that have averaged 30% with a 3% standard deviation, and they expect that to keep happening. Well, It's like, okay, that is the definition of hindsight. That's called data torturing, where you're fitting the data to something that really doesn't seem practical.
Right. And in actual practice, it hasn't really worked, right? I mean, as we've gone through it hasn't continued to maintain its 3% standard deviation, at least in my experience.
Standard deviation is a useful metric.
Sure.
But it shouldn't be that low. There's actually some optimum value, and I'm sure Brian Connett knows more about this than I do because he knows stats. But there's some optimal value that standard deviation is, and it's probably closer to like 10 to 12%. I don't know for sure. But the idea is that the market has great years and it has bad years.
Right.
Right. And if you're looking at a strategy that has a really tight standard deviation, which means it's done well in the good years and done well in the bad years, well, that doesn't seem practical.
Right.
Whereas the strategy that you and I are talking about, rather than measuring it by mean, we're measuring it by, beats the S fund as often as possible, which means the stock market could have a bad year, and this strategy might also have a bad year. But if the S fund is down 7%, but the strategy is down 6%, then I won.
Then you won, right? Yep.
And the annual standard deviation in such a case is not going to be great.
Right. And it doesn't matter at that point because that's not your goal, right?
Oh.
Right.
So I've even been tempted to remove that metric, but
I think you would have the pitchforks coming if you took standard deviation. Yeah, that would bring out the angry villagers.
But my goal is to keep highlighting these strategies, which are CS only or CSI only, and show some promise of beating the market by about 1%. I think that's a huge deal, and we should keep beating this drum.
Yeah. Yep, I agree.
And I mean, that is where I invest my personal finances.
Right.
So whatever that's worth. I mean, I'm hesitant to give advice per se, but like I'm betting my money on it, and I built the thing. So
right. So take that for what it's worth, right?
Yeah, I'm not chasing a 3% standard deviation on the year.
Right. Yeah, and I'm with you. I mean, I've evolved on my thought process on that, and I think it's fair to say that my opinion has changed. So I'm excited to continue to do it, and hopefully it continues to beat. As long as it beats Jaron, I really don't care.
I mean, if I beat Jaron, that's almost worth like $100,000 in my pocket.
At least. That
feels so good. It's just, oh man.
Awesome. Well, Matt, I really appreciate you stopping by. Is there anything else that you'd want to leave the listeners with today, or any other housekeeping items you want to discuss before we sign off? Well,
I don't really want to commit myself to anything, but I think I think the seasonal builder repairs are going to be done in about 2 days, and then the blind test will be recalculated, and I'll probably put out a blog post about those probably on Sunday.
Cool. Awesome. Well, we look forward to reading it. So, so Matt, again, thanks for stopping by. And of course, Travis's Musings is brought to you by TSPCalc. So make sure you guys head on over there and check out the website if you guys haven't. And we'll catch you next time.
All right. I'm going to go have a beer. Good night, Travis.
Thanks, Matt.